In the heat-soaked hush that hung over the settlement of Dry Creek, every word carried weight, and every glance could shape a destiny. Morning light, filtered through swirling dust, revealed a lone figure making her way along the cracked planks of the town's boardwalk. She paused beneath the battered sign of the Silver Moon Trading Post, her pale hand brushing against the scarred wood. Isadora Crane's eyes, the color of storm-tossed seas, swept the empty street. The pregnancy that weighed against her soft silhouette was not the gentle promise of new life, but a fierce reminder of loss. The child she carried would never know the warm breath and easy laughter of her late husband, Samuel. Gone these 3 months now, carried off by fever after a rail strike had turned violent. Since then, every dawn had been a battle against despair, every sunset a mercy that spared her the terrible brightness of regret. She drew in a breath of sun-baked air and stepped inside. The trading post was cool and shadowed, the walls lined with barrels of salted pork, sacks of flour, and the detritus of frontier life. Behind the counter stood Laurent Beaumont, the French trader with a reputation as sharp as the knives he hawked. He inclined his head. "Mademoiselle Crane, long time, tables ready." Isadora offered a wan smile and eased onto a stool near the window, cradling her belly. She watched a tumbleweed sweep across the street outside. The town's only saloon, the Rusty Spur, had been closed since last night's gunfight, 2 drunks over money owed. Nothing her concern now. Nothing except the promise she'd made to herself, to find work worthy enough to feed her child, to stand tall among men who spat at widows and mocked the pregnant. The door swung open, and in strode a man whose gait was both cautious and resolute. He wore a dust-streaked duster that barely concealed what remained of his right arm, nothing more than a stump cuffed at the shoulder, the sleeve pinned back to keep it free. His hat, tipped low, cast a shadow over his square jaw. He carried himself with the measured stillness of a predator. Laurent's voice lowered. "Cole Rollins. No one wants to hire a one-armed cowboy, least of all for the risks of these border jobs." Cole paused at the threshold. His one good hand eased the brim of his hat, revealing ice-blue eyes that flicked to Isadora, then away. He nodded once and moved to a table in the back. The trading post held its breath. Men whispered about what a lone gunman with half a body was doing here. Isadora's heart tilted between pity and curiosity. She remembered him from 6 months past, a man who drifted through Dry Creek like smoke. No one knew his past, though rumors whispered of a railroad land dispute gone sour, ambushed by hired hands, the arm lost to a shotgun blast. Since then, he'd drifted, hunted odd jobs, eked out a living. She ate slowly, savoring the thin stew. Laurent ladled for her. The warmth settled in her belly, a small comfort against the gnawing ache. She heard the soft scrape of Cole's boot against the plank floor as he rose and approached her table. "Crane?" His voice was low, rough-hewn. She looked up. "Yes?" Cole extended his one hand. "Cole Rollins. Heard you might need help hauling supplies out to the fort at Echo Pass." Isadora blinked. The job was backbreaking. 50 miles of rocky trail, heat that baked flesh, bandits rumored along the way. Most men refused. Yet here stood the one-armed Cowboy offering his services. She studied him in silence. Laurent cleared his throat behind the counter, but they all knew this was her choice. Isadora swallowed. She touched the top of her belly. I'm in." Cole nodded, retrieving a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. He slid it across the tabletop. 4 horses, 50 pounds of flour per pack, silver paid at delivery. "Terms as good as any," he said. No promises beyond that. As he turned to leave, he paused. "Take care of yourself, Mrs. Crane. The trail won't." Then he strode out, leaving Isadora alone by the window, the paper trembling in her grasp. Even as she rose to follow him, her thoughts raced. How could one man with half a body shoulder this burden? What ghosts trailed him? And why did the sight of him stir something fierce and ancient within her? A longing for a protector, and the whisper of hope she thought long buried. She tucked the contract into her satchel and stepped back into the sun. The dusty street stretched ahead, empty save for the sway of that same tumbleweed. With measured steps, she walked to the stable where Cole had unsaddled his 3 horses. Their flanks glistened with sweat. He murmured to them in a voice soft enough that Isadora almost didn't hear, "Easy now, sisters, we'll rest soon." His words held a tenderness that seemed at odds with the steely line of his shoulders. Isadora approached. "Mr. Rawlins?" He turned, startled, then nodded. "Mrs. Crane." She hesitated, then held out her hand to the lead mare. The animal nuzzled her palm, and Cole's eyes flicked to hers. "She's quick," he said. "Good for the pass. Won't tie her easy." Isadora felt tension ease from her chest. "Then I'll ride her." He inclined his head. "Be here before supper. We leave at first light." With that, he returned to his work, and Isadora walked away, the weight on her back both physical and mercilessly emotional. The sun sank lower, painting Dry Creek in golden blood. In a town forgotten by time, where legends were written by grit and gunpowder, a widow and a one-armed cowboy had bound their fates together. Neither knew what waited beyond the next ridge, but for the first time since loss had claimed her heart, Isadora Crane felt something like destiny stirring in her veins. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The lanterns of Dry Creek flickered to life as dusk settled, their halos faint against the dusty red sky. Isadora Crane returned to the Silver Moon trading post, just as Laurent quashed the final embers of conversation. Chairs scraped wood floors, and shutters rattled in the cooling breeze. Her footsteps were cautious, the leather of her boots creaking with each step. She carried her satchel close, every ounce of weight, a contract, a letter, a sliver of hope pressing against her side. Cole. Rawlins was already there. Gloved hand deftly cinching the cinch on Scarlet, the sorrel mare Isadora had claimed. His face was turned away, jaw tight in concentration. He finished and glanced over his shoulder, his one arm swinging free at his side like a pendulum of readiness. When he met her eyes, Isadora sensed a depth beyond the harsh lines of his weathered features. "Everything's set," he said, voice low but not unkind. "Trail's clear for now. We move at dawn." Isadora nodded, smoothing a wrinkle in her faded dress. She tried to steel herself for what lay ahead. Long hours in the saddle, narrow passes where bandits lurked, and the ever-present ache in her belly that reminded her of what she'd lost. But it was the ache that also bound her to life-proof. Of Samuel's blood in her veins and the legacy she would carry forward. She met Cole at the corral fence. "Show me the gear," she said, letting resolve lace her tone. His eyes flicked to her belly, then back to her face. He gestured toward a stack of oilskins and leather satchels. "Saddle up. I'll pack the rest." Isadora moved to the horses. Running gloved fingers over the smooth curves of Tawny, a sturdy bay, and Ember, the pale mare. Each had been chosen for endurance and shoe-footedness. When she cinched her saddle and secured water skins to the pommel, Cole approached with bags of flour and cured bacon. He loaded them with precise care, as if each sack were a fragile promise. "Half rations," he said simply. She paused. "Why half?" Cole glanced at the sky. Night would bring chill, frost in the pass. They'd need energy. If they rationed, they'd pace the journey and ensure no one starved. Bandits took what the living needed. They left bodies in the dust. If either died, the other would bury them alone. Isadora absorbed his words. She felt something stir in her chest: gratitude, fear, determination. This cowboy, with half a body and a full measure of grit, would see her through. Night deepened. Laurent extinguished lanterns in the trading post, except one over the porch. He stepped out, a dark silhouette, Safe journey, Madame Crane, Mr. Rollins. Cole tipped his hat. Merci. The silence became their companion as they mounted. Scarlet whinnied softly, her breath steaming. Tawny and Ember snorted, restless in the dim light. Isadora's hand tightened on the reins, heart pounding. Stay close, Cole murmured, leading them down the boardwalk to the rutted trail. The first star glimmered overhead, a pinprick of hope in a sky of obsidian dot. By the time the trio cleared the last wooden shack, the town of Dry Creek was behind them, its secrets sealed in darkness. The trail stretched ahead, a ribbon of pale dust winding into the unknown. Mountains loomed like sentinels, their peaks lost in a blanket of night fog. The air smelled of creosote and wild sage. Isadora pressed her heels to Tawny's flanks. The mare surged forward, hooves kicking up silver motes in the lantern glow. Cole followed, cloaked in his duster, the stump of his right arm hidden beneath folds of cloth. His silhouette was a study in resilience. They rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of saddle leather and a distant owl's call. Isadora kept her pulse steady, counting breaths, memorizing shadows. Every loose rock, every whisper of wind through juniper could conceal danger. She felt the world contract, turn sharp and immediate. Ahead lay echo past narrow walls of basalt. Tailless slopes, a gauntlet that had broken more men than the Apache ever could. Cole led them into the mouth of the canyon, where moonlight shivered on stone. At the entrance he halted. Rest here, he said softly. Isadora's pulse thundered. She dismounted, hands trembling. He offered her water, and she drank with slow reverence, the cool liquid washing heat from her throat. Cole stroked Scarlet's neck, glancing at her with something like respect. Good horse, he said. Should carry you safe. She met his gaze. So will you? He inclined his head, but his eyes held a shadow pain or memory she couldn't tell. They were both aware of the distance they still had to travel. Nights on rough ground, days under an unrelenting sun. She swallowed. What happened? She said quietly. Back in town. Why are you here? Cole stiffened. Stars glittered between the canyon walls, indifferent witnesses. He exhaled, then shook his head. Places like Dry Creek. They give you a chance to vanish. Always moving enough that no one figures out who you used to be and who you might become. Isadora understood that truth. She'd come to Dry Creek to escape sorrow, half in shame, half in hope. Now riding the line between two worlds past and future, she felt every scar and every longing. She extended her good hand. My husband, he believed in sanctuary. I want to believe I can find one too. Cole's gaze softened. Sanctuary ain't a place. It's the company you keep. Her breath caught. In his words lay a promise and a warning. She nodded, acceptance and resolve knitting into her heart. They rested less than an hour before Cole roused her. Time, he said. They mounted again. Pressing deeper into the pass, the trail narrowed, cliffs closing in. Loose boulders perched overhead. The horses moved with careful trust. Isadora rode beside Cole, her gaze flicking to the stump of his arm, to the set of his broad shoulders through the duster dot at a sharp bend. Scarlet skidded, her hooves throwing sparks. Cole sprang to his stirrup, steadying her with one arm. She patted the mare's flank. Thank you. He gave a curt nod, lips pressed tight. Thunder rumbled beyond the peaks dot they rode on. Each echo meant possibility rain, or the rush of bandits winding through the rock to surprise them. The air crackled with tension, as if the canyon itself waited for blood. Isadora's thoughts drifted to Samuel, to the dawn they'd planned, to the laughter they never shared. Her belly tightened, and she placed a gentle hand on the curve of life within her. I'll get through this, she murmured. Cole's voice drifted back, one step at a time. And so they pressed forward into the mouth of the pass, two souls, bound by loss and hardened by survival. The trail ahead was fraught with peril, But beneath the hush of night, each heartbeat was a vow. To live, to protect, to endure. The lantern at Isadora's hip dimmed further. Beyond lay only darkness. But she felt no fear. In the company of a one-armed cowboy, she had found the sharp edge of courage. Night's embrace deepened as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins pressed further into Echo Pass's yawning chasm. The lanterns slung from their saddle horns cast ragged shadows against the rock walls, flickering like restless spirits. The wind whispered. Through jagged pinnacles, carrying the chill that seeped beneath Isadora's shawl and made her shiver despite her resolve, Cole rode beside her, his posture rigid with focus. The stump of his right arm, wrapped in oilskin, swung gently a counterbalance to the ease with which he guided his horse Scarlet. His one good hand gripped the reins with practiced strength, knuckles bleached white beneath leather gloves. Isadora took in his profile, the faint scar tracing along his jaw, the slate-gray eyes, and the way his duster hung heavy across his shoulders, a silent testament to battles won and ghosts left behind. They entered a narrow corridor of rock where the moonlight barely reached. Heights loomed above, overhangs poised like executioner's blades. Isadora's heart pounded. She urged Tawny forward with a gentle nudge. Every step demanded attention. Loose pebbles skittered under hoof, a warning of unsteady ground. A sudden noise, a low, rolling rumble, echoed through the pass. The horses froze. Scarlet's ears pricked. Tawny's nostrils flared. Isadora's breath caught. "Rockslide," Cole said, voice hushed. Up ahead. He dismounted swiftly, kicking free from the stirrups. Isadora followed, landing lightly despite the weight of her unborn child. They stood side by side, lanterns held high through the darkness. The path ahead seemed blocked, a smear of boulders across the trail, pinning at least one large stone as if it had been wedged deliberately. Cole crouched beside it, inspecting the formation. "This came down recently, not natural," Isadora swallowed. "Bandits?" He nodded. "Bandits are someone wanting to slow us. Could be a setup." The realization knotted her stomach. They were exposed, trapped between walls that would amplify any noise. And against them stood unknown adversaries, laying ambush in the dark. Cole rose, eyes scanning above. "We need to clear a path or find another route. Stay close." He produced a small pickaxe strapped to his saddle. Isadora's breath caught at the gleam of steel. The tool had been concealed, another piece of Rollins's survivalist arsenal. Without a word, she retrieved her folding knife, its blade slim but sturdy. Together, they pried at the loosened rocks, the clang of metal on stone echoing dreadfully. Minutes passed like hours. Sweat beaded on Isadora's brow despite the cold. Each movement strained her, the pressure on her belly intensifying. She paused, pressing a gloved hand to her side, breath coming in shallow gulps. Cole ceased his work and knelt beside her. "You okay?" She nodded, though her vision blurred at the edges. "Just need a moment." He offered water in a leather canteen. She drank gratefully, the cool rush soothing. He wiped her brow, fingers surprisingly gentle. "Thank you," she whispered. In that moment, the canyon silence sharpened, the absence of wind, the holding of breath. Then came a distant shout, muffled but urgent. Figures emerged on a ledge. Above, silhouettes of men, rifles slung low, watching. Cole's jaw tightened. "Bandits!" Isadora's heart thundered. She climbed onto Scarlet, drawing her knife, ready to fight despite her condition. But Cole placed a hand on her leg, urging calm. "Not yet. We don't know numbers," he raised his voice. "Whoever's up there, this pass is ours to share. Lower your rifles, or we move on foot." Silence answered. Then a voice, rough and mocking. "Easy, cowboy. That ain't the law. This is our claim-rich ore to the north. You and your bride-to-be move on, or we make an example." A flare of anger ignited in Isadora's chest at the derisive tone. but she recalled Cole's steady presence. She silenced herself, watching as he exchanged places, shifting weight. Every movement a calculated risk. "I'm no cowboy," Cole said. "Just a man trying to go to town. We'll share the pass fare, half your load, half ours. Otherwise, he'll stand here all night. And I don't reckon you'll like the morning light catching your faces through a rifle's scope." He spoke with quiet authority, every word measured. Isadora saw fear flicker across the bandits above, the same instinctive response she felt when facing life's cruelties. Their grip on rifles loosened. Moments stretched. Then one man, heavier than the rest, stepped forward. His coat was too fine for mining hands. He spat. "You're brave, Rollins. Bet you were braver before you lost your arm." Cole's eyes remained locked on the speaker. He reached under his duster, producing a small folded card, its edges singed. He flicked it open. On it, a brand, the mark of the territory's railroad company. "I'm under contract," he said softly. "This pass is ours. You're trespassing." The man hesitated, face paling. "This good for you?" Cole folded the card, tucking it away. "Law says so." A charged silence. Then boulders above shuddered, small stones rattling free. Bandits. Flinched. Cole set the pickaxe against a rock's edge, eyes never leaving the ledge. "Here's how this ends," he said. "You let us through. We leave all claims behind. You pack your ore and ride north before dawn. We'll forget this meeting. You won't like it if I say different." The man on the ledge glared, eyes flicking to his men. Sweat glistened on his brow as the wind picked up. Isadora gripped Tawny's reins, knuckles white. She glanced at Cole, heart pounding. His calm steadied her at last. The man raised his hand in reluctant concession. Bandits shifted, rifles hoisted. Back into slings. They melted into the darkness above. A smudge against the rocky canvas. Cole exhaled. He set to work with Isadora, clearing the remaining stones. The path reopened, a scar of possibility through the rock. Isadora mounted once more, legs trembling with relief. Cole helped her settle. He swung onto Scarlet with fluid grace, then rode closer. "You did good," he said, voice low. Her breath caught. "I couldn't, Faye," she began. He held up a finger. You and I together." She met his gaze, witnessing the stark vulnerability beneath his resolve. In the lantern's glow, she saw the man behind the myth, a one-armed cowboy whose heart was as fierce as his aim. They moved on, deeper into the pass. Above, rock settled into silence. The trail stretched into the unknown, but Isadora's fear had softened, replaced by a steely purpose. With each mile, she claimed her strength, and beside her, Cole Rollins guarded it with unwavering loyalty. The night air crackled with whispered promise that beyond this trial lay more than survival. It held redemption, perhaps even a palace built by a bare hand, strong enough to shelter hope itself. Dawn's first light spilled into Echo Pass as Isadora Crane stirred in the saddle, the chill from the night air lingering in her bones. She blinked against the pale glow filtering through the canyon walls, revealing keen lines carved into the rocks by centuries of wind and rain. Every crevice seemed alive with lingering secrets. Cole Rollins stood before her, adjusting the cinch on Scarlet, the sorrel mare's flank still heaving from the night's exertion. His rugged face was softened. By the twilight, faint circles under his slate-gray eyes telling of little sleep. Yet his stature remained unbowed, even with the stump of his right arm wrapped in fresh bandages. "Ready?" he asked, voice low as gravel. She nodded, swallowing against the ache in her throat and stomach. The pass beyond this point was steeper. Narrow ledges, sheer drops, and snow-mold streams turning to ice in shaded hollows. They had to move swiftly to avoid afternoon storms. Isadora slid from Tawny's back, joints stiff. She ran a hand over the mare's neck. "Let's tend the horses first." They worked in unison. Cole unsaddled Scarlet, Isadora loosened Tawny's girth, then cleaned hooves and checked for bruises. Even the horses needed care to make it through the day. Cole offered water and a few swallows of hardtack. Isadora accepted, the stale crumbs settling like grit in her belly. They mounted again, pressing deeper into the heart of Echo Pass. The trail became a narrow shelf carved into the canyon wall, a sheer drop to a frozen creek bed below. Snow and ice crunched under hoof, thin ice threatening to give way. "Careful," Cole murmured, voice barely audible over the wind's sigh through the gaps. Isadora set her jaw and leaned forward, balancing carefully. Each step was an exercise in trust in the mare's shoe-fittedness and in Cole's calm guidance. She recalled Samuel's laughter when he taught her to ride as a girl, carefree on broad plains. Now every ride was tempered by necessity. And danger dotted a blind corner. Tawny shivered. She halted abruptly, ears pricked forward. Isadora sat tense, breath caught between hope and fear. Through the thinning mist, shapes materialized. Figures crouched at the trail's edge, rifles raised. Bandits. Cole slid from Scarlet's saddle in one smooth move and dropped behind a jutting rock. Isadora dismounted, pressing against the wall, heart pounding. Above them, a group of men aimed down the narrow shelf. Their leader, a broad-shouldered man with a scar down his left cheek, spoke into a rattling voice. "Hand over your supplies. And empty your guns, or we pick you off one at a time." The wind carried his threat, talon sharp. Isadora's pulse thundered. She thought of the contract's payment food for her unborn child, her chance at a new life, and of the palace promised in whispered tales of a one-armed cowboy's skill. Cole's voice cut the tension, low and unwavering. "You'll want to think again. These horses are the only chance you've got to get through here alive. One wrong shot, and you'll feed the river below." The scarred leader sneered. "Bravado from a cripple," he spat. Isadora's gut twisted at the insult. She gripped the leather satchel, weighing its contents. Sacks of flour, cured meat, the payment she needed. The child within her kicked. Cole stepped forward, exposing more of his duster. "Crippled? Lost a limb, not my aim. You don't get to choose the ground you fight on." The man's sneer faltered. He glanced at his men, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. Below, the creek glimmered, the drop unforgiving. Isadora swallowed. She raised her voice, firm but calm. "We're travelers with no quarrel. Let us pass and we'll share what we have, but we will defend ourselves if forced." Her words carried across the cold air, clear as a bell. She felt Cole's eyes on her pride, tempered by worry. The man with the scar studied her, lips curling. Then he waved a lazy hand. "Fine, move along, but don't say we didn't warn you." Cole exhaled, nodding once. He helped Isadora remount, while the bandits slinked back into the shadows. The pass lay open once more, but the threat lingered like a dark stain. They rode on, every muscle taut. The trail climbed higher, the air thinner. Snow turned to packed ice, and the canyon walls closed in until they were mere paces apart, towering above them. At midday, they reached a shelf with a small pool fed by dripping meltwater. Isadora slid from Tawny and knelt to fill her canteen. Cole stood guard, scanning the ledges. She watched him. Vulnerability in his stance, always ready for ambush, always bearing the weight of protecting another. Her heart wrenched at the thought. "Cole," she said softly, "why do you help me? You could have passed by, no one would have blamed you." He turned, gaze meeting hers. The light caught the scar on his jaw, the rank of man before legend. "Because," he said, "everyone deserves a chance. Samuel believed that. And you remind me of why it matters." She blinked, moved by his honesty. Behind them, Tawny nickered, the moment stretching between them. His eyes flicked to her belly. "And you deserve someone to watch over both of you." Isadora's chest tightened. Hope, once buried beneath loss, surfaced again, fragile but insistent. She held his gaze, then bent to fill her canteens. Cole watched, a silent sentinel. In the hush, the canyon breathed around them, the pass ahead both perilous and promising. They mounted again and pressed on. The pass narrowed to a slit of ice-worn sandstone, honeycombed with runnels. Each hoof step was a testament to trust. In the horses, in each other, and in the promise of a tomorrow built by bare hands and unwavering faith. Behind them, the canyon held its breath. Ahead, the trail beckoned an unforgiving path toward destiny. The sky above Echo Pass deepened from the pale blush of dawn to the steel gray of mid-morning as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins pressed onward. Along the rocky shelf, they followed the ribbon of trickling meltwater, the high cliffs on either side, erasing all memory of Dry Creek's dusty streets and turning the world into a cathedral of stone. Isadora rode with her chin tucked against the biting wind, each breath a visible puff. Her belly tightened in waves, a reminder that life pulsed beneath her ribs. She glanced at Cole, noting the determination etched on his face, every line of muscle taut to guard, to anticipate danger, to survive. They paused at a jagged outcrop, where the trail split, one narrow ledge winding upward, the other sloping down toward a hidden gully. From above came the distant roar of a mountain stream. Cole dismounted, lantern swinging from his wrist. "Choices," he murmured, voice as quiet as drifting snow. "The left path climbs slower but exposes us to the sky. The right cuts through. The gully more cover, but narrower." Isadora studied the angles. The gully looked like a tunnel of rock and ice shadows pooling, sun scarce. She shivered. "I hate enclosed spaces." He offered her a gentle smile. "Then we'll take the shelf. Better footing, too." She nodded, then assisted him with Scarlet's cinch. He returned the favor when she mounted Tawny. Together, they threaded the shelf, narrow, seldom wider than a horse's flank. The drop to the creek bed yawning like a grave dot in a bend. The shelf ended abruptly. A chasm yawned before them, bridge-like stones spanning a narrow gap. Moss slicked their surfaces, half buried in snow. Isadora's pulse spiked. This crossing demanded absolute trust in the horses and in each other. Cole dismounted again, urging Scarlet to the edge. He reached behind him and drew a length of braided hemp rope from beneath his duster. In one practiced movement, he looped it through Scarlet's saddle horn, and then tied the other end around Tawny's girth, forming a lifeline between the beasts. Isadora's breath caught. "Why?" Cole looked up at her, expression steady. "In case one horse slips, the other holds her. It's used in freight transport, keeps loads from crashing when mules misstep." She swallowed, admiration and fear warring in her chest. "Teach me." He moved her hand onto the rope, showing her the knot twisted around Tawny's leather. "Keep tension but not too tight." Let them lean together. Moments later, they stood side by side. Cole settled on Scarlet, and Isadora climbed Tawny Hart, hammering so loud she thought the horses might hear. He gave a soft nod. Forward. Tawny's hoof creaked on the first stone. Scarlet stepped onto the next, the rope taut. Then together they advanced, one careful foot after another. The world held its breath. No wind, no birdsong, only the soft scrape of hoof on stone and the distant burble of the stream. Isadora's knuckles whitened on the reins. Halfway across, she glanced down into the chasm. Ice-coated boulders lined the creek below like bones. She swallowed hard. A branch of instinct urged flight and collapse. But at the next heartbeat, she straightened, trusting Tawny's shoe-footedness and Scarlet's steady weight. Stone, horse, woman, a fragile alliance balancing life and death. When at last they touched solid ground, Isadora exhaled a rush of relief that nearly bucked her from the saddle. Cole waited a paces away, eyes warm. He released the rope, coiling it quickly. "You did well," her voice cracked. "I thought He shook his head. You did it. That's what counts. She pressed a hand to her belly. The baby kicked, a tiny drumbeat of hope. Isadora swallowed. This path, it's teaching me who I can be. Cole's gaze softened, torn between respect and a fierce protectiveness. You're stronger than you know, they rode on. Beyond the chasm, the canyon opened to a small plateau dotted with hardy pines. Snow melted into rivulets, filling shallow pools in the rock. Isadora slid down from Tawny to gather water. Cole stood guard, his silhouette stark against the sky. She knelt, cupped her hands to the stream, but paused when she saw something glinting in the shallows. A small, ornately carved silver locket half buried in ice. She drew it free, brushing aside snow to reveal initials EC. Her breath caught. She traced the engraving. A mother's gift to her child, maybe. The locket's chain remained intact, a whisper of another life in its sudden fracture. Cole approached, eyes narrowing. Where? Look. He knelt beside her. His jaw clenched when he recognized the craftsmanship. That's Empire Company stock. Rich folk wear those. Isadora's pulse quickened. Could be a miner's keepsake. He examined it closely. Or a planted trap fake treasure to lure passers-by. Her heart pounded. They'd cleared ambushes once could face them again. The locket's cold surface felt like a warning. Not all riches in these mountains were honest. Cole slipped the locket into his coat with deliberate care. Stay sharp, they remounted. The plateau ended at a jagged notch where the trail plunged into shadowed crevasses. Edward Canyon waited below, where the river roared along a gorge. Isadora inhaled. Steeling herself, Cole's hand brushed her arm. Whatever comes, we face it together. Her breath hitched. The words weren't heroic, they were home. She met his gaze. Together. They rode toward the gorge's mouth, the wind carrying their wills forward. Beyond lay Echo Passes. Final trial, and with it, the promise that a palace of possibility could rise from bare hands. By the time the pale light of morning filtered through the narrowing walls of Echo Pass, Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins had pressed deeper into its labyrinthine folds. The air, crisp with the chill of melting ice, carried the scent of damp earth and pine resin. Beneath their horses' steady hoofbeats, the trail angled downward toward the distant roar of the Greywater River, its voice both warning and invitation. Cole led the way, eyes sharp for pitfalls or fresh signs of ambush. His one good hand rested casually on the grip of his Colt, half concealed beneath his coat. Despite the raw tenderness of his wound, he moved with assured precision, boots sliding into the stirrups as if born to this life of peril and promise. Isadora followed, her own pulse synchronized with the rhythm of Tawny's gait. Each breath bore the tang of adrenaline mingled with a new sense of determination. With every mile they covered, she felt the fragile weight of her unborn child as both burden and beacon. This journey would shape two lives, and nothing could remain the same once they emerged from these canyons. They paused at the canyon's edge, where a wooden footbridge, its planks warped by frost and age, spanned the Greywater's tumult. Water thundered beneath, whitecaps churning around submerged boulders. Cole studied the structure, running a gaunted finger along its broken railing. Bridges sound, he murmured. It's been patched too many times. Isadora dismounted, the cold biting through her gloves. Beneath the boards, she peered. Down, legs trembling. To her unborn child, the world must have seemed a vision of storm-tossed seas. Cole's voice broke her focus. We cross together, one horse at a time. I'll guide you. She nodded, steeling herself. He held Tawny's bridle as she mounted, legs wobbling but resolute. When she signaled, Cole ushered Scarlet onto the bridge. The boards groaned and shifted, but held. Midway, a plank snapped beneath Scarlet's hoof, sending a jolt through her. Rider, Scarlet's ears flattened. She whinnied, half choked by fright. Isadora slid from Tawny to steady her, her heart clenching at the mare's panic. Cole dismounted, racing across the planks to shoulder Scarlet's flank. He stopped to stabilize the trembling horse, voice low. "Easy, girl, we'll make it." Isadora climbed Tawny back into the saddle, then set one foot on the broken plank. With Cole's steadying hand, she guided Tawny onward. Each step demanded faith, faith in the wood, faith in the horses, faith in the man beside her. When both mares stood safely on the far bank, Isadora lowered herself from Tawny, legs quivering. Cole scooped her into a brief embrace, his warmth seeping through her layers of wool and leather. "This thing," he said, tapping his bandaged stump lightly, "it doesn't define me." She looked up, her sea-gray eyes meeting his. "Neither does fear." He offered a rare smile before releasing her. They remounted, forging deeper into the canyon's narrow throat. The walls here soared so high that their peaks vanished in mist, and sunlight barely kissed the trail. In this world, carved by time and water, they rode in companionable silence. The canyon floor fell away in gorges and ravines, each a testament to nature's relentless fury. Isadora found herself reflecting on Samuel's dreams of home, a modest cabin nestled by a river, laughter echoing beneath a porch. Now her dreams had grown bolder, a palace built of wood and stone, carved by the hand of a man who believed a widow and her child deserved a kingdom. Cole stopped at an outcropping, where wild roses bloomed stubbornly amid the rocks. The sight startled Isadora. She had glimpsed no sign of such tenderness in weeks. He cut a small spray of blossoms, its petals pale pink. He offered it to her. "Because you deserve beauty." She accepted, breath catching on the fragrance. In that simple gesture lay more affection than any words could hold. She pressed the roses to her lips, tears stinging her eyes. Before she could speak, Cole's gaze snapped to the trail's curve. Dust plumed beyond a cloud of hoofbeats approaching fast. He slid from Scarlet, hand on his colt. Isadora's pulse slammed. Raiders, perhaps those from before, or a new danger. She dismounted, drawing her knife as he moved to a rock ledge. Squadron of riders spilled into view, 12 strong, faces masked by scarves, rifles slung across saddles. Their leader rode a black stallion, eyes cold behind wind-creased skin. "Rollins," the leader called, voice carrying over the wind. "You crossed into blood debt. Time to pay." Cole stepped forward, stance wide. "This isn't your land." "Turn back," the masked man laughed, hoofbeats thundering. "You know the code. We claim your strength." Isadora's breath hitched. 12 rifles, a dozen angry souls. And here they stood, 2 against 12, one wounded and one carrying life. Cole's hand hovered near his colt. He met her eyes, no fear, only resolve. He dipped his head. Together. In that dangerous hush, she stepped to his side. The roses drooped in her hand, petals brushing the blade of her knife. The canyon's walls seemed to lean in, stones echoing with the promise of violence. Thunder rumbled far above, or perhaps it was the pounding of her heart. Cole inhaled, slowed time with a gunfighter's calm. "You want strength? You'll find it." He raised his colt in measured salute after the first shot lands. Before the masked man could react, the report cracked through the canyon. Scarlet's iron-shod hoof striking rock, a pistol's roar, and the black stallion reared, its rider thrown. Chaos erupted. Horses bolted, men scrambled, and in the swirl, Isadora saw Cole's colt bark again, then another. She lunged forward, knife slicing through scarves and startled flesh. The dust choked, the clang of steel rang, and through it all, she felt the promise of life stirring inside her, a pulse mingling with the thrum of violence and the steady beat of her own courage. They fought back to back, a widow and her one-armed Cowboy, a palace rising in each blow, one hand bare, one heart full. In that torrent of gunpowder and grit, they fashioned sanctuary from the storm. Morning mist clung to the rocky walls of Echo Pass as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins crept forward, each hoofbeat muffled by damp soil. The canyon's hush was broken only by the muted rush of meltwater carving the gorge below. Above them, the sun's pale fingers edged across the rim, promising warmth but also betrayal by shadows. Isadora rode Tawny in the lead, the mare's ears flicking with every sharp sound. Her belly pressed against the saddle's swell, and she tucked her chin against the crisp air. Ahead, Cole guided Scarlet, his one good hand firm on the reins, the other brushing the cold steel of his coat's butt beneath his coat. They reached a narrow bench carved along a sheer precipice. One false step meant certain death. Isadora slowed, Tawny, legs trembling. The ledge dipped to one side, a wall of stone to the other. No room for fear. Cole dismounted and reached for her hand as she slid down. He adjusted Tawny's bridle before taking Scarlet's reins in his good hand and wrapping the rope around his stump-wrapped shoulder to secure her. The stallion stood patient, trusting. A silent ally in their journey. "You ready?" Cole asked. Breath steaming, she nodded, voice catching. "With you." He offered a nod, then set Tawny before her, guiding her hoof along the narrow path. Each hoof sank into frost-bitten ground, slipping sometimes but finding hold. Isadora gripped the saddle horn, knuckles white as bone. Halfway across, Tawny stumbled, her back leg sliding toward the void. Instinctively, Isadora leaned forward, twisting the rein so Tawny's head turned inward, weight shifting back to the rock wall. The mare righted herself, heart pounding. Isadora exhaled, grounding her gaze on the path ahead. When Tawny emerged safely, Cole steadied her with a gentle touch. "Well done." She managed a breathless smile and guided Tawny back toward him. He helped her remount. Lights and cold receded as they pressed deeper. The walls of the pass gave way to a widening valley blanketed by spring grasses and wildflowers blooming defiantly. The change in terrain was sudden, as if the mountains exhaled relief into open sky. Isadora inhaled the sweet tang of sagebrush. Here, birdsong returned, a trilling hymn of life. She glanced at Cole, whose eyes lit with a rare softness. They rode toward a creek crossing marked by a tangle of driftwood and stones smoothed by seasons of floods. Cole dismounted again, checking the depth before guiding Tawny into the water. Isadora followed, water swirling around her boots and lapping at Tawny's flanks. On the far bank, she paused to gather herself. A sense of calm washed through her. A fragile shore in a sea of uncertainty. Cole passed her a canteen. She drank deeply, tasting hope. "Not far now," he said, voice quiet with promise. She met his gaze, gratitude warming her chest. "I almost lost faith." He shook his head. "Faith is earned. You've earned yours." They mounted again, riding toward a stand of pines that clustered around an abandoned miner's cabin. Weathered logs nestled into a hillside. Smoke curled from its chimney, faint and gray. Isadora's pulse caught. Someone's here. Cole guided Scarlet beneath low branches. A thin plume rose from the stovepipe, telling of recent visitors. He spoke softly. "Stay alert." They approached. The cabin door hung open, revealing a fire pit still warm. Inside, crates of preserved food sat stacked neatly: flour, jerky, and tins of beans. A cot in the corner held a crudely carved telegraph relay panel. Isadora dismounted, curiosity and caution warring within her. She moved to the door, eyes scanning. A scrap of leather lay on the floor, stamped with the Empire Company's insignia, the same as Rollins's locket. Cole joined her, eyes flicking to the panel by the cot. "Looks like someone's rendezvous point." She ran fingertips over the crates, mind racing. Supplies left intentionally, perhaps for travelers like them, or set as bait. She picked up a telegram slip pinned to the door, directions: "Meeting time tomorrow," signed only with initials. Her heart thrummed. They were not alone. Powers beyond simple bandits eyed their passage. Cole's gaze met hers. We decide, press on or wait. She weighed the momentum behind her, the promise of wages, the safety of her child, the steel of her own resolve. Every step had been uphill. Turning back was as perilous as forging ahead. I press on, she said firmly. With you. He nodded, respect shining in his gray eyes. Then let's move. They loaded supplies, 2 sacks of flour, salted pork, tobacco, and the telegram. Cole stowed the locket in her satchel. The cabin's warmth and its secrets lingered as they mounted dot beyond the trees. Echo Pass's exit yawned, a crescent of open plains stretching toward the railroad line in the distance. Freedom and danger waited in equal measure. Tawny and Scarlet surged forward, hooves thundering over grass. Isadora clutched the reins, heart soaring. Beside her, Cole guided Scarlet, his single arm steady as a lodestar dot in that flash of dawn. Life surged anew beneath her ribs, a pulse echoing the land's promise, that from loss could rise a palace of hope, crafted by one hand and guarded by 2 hearts. The canyon's mouth yawned wide before them as dawn broke in washes of gold and rose. Dry grasses swayed beyond the rocky tunnel, promising an end to Echo Pass's relentless confine. Isadora Crane shaded her eyes against the sudden brightness, the wind tossing a stray lock of hair across her face. Her breath came steady now, each inhale a celebration of progress and anticipation. Cole Rawlins guided Scarlet onto the open plains, the mare's hooves pounding new territory. He kept a hand on Tawny's flank, urging her forward with careful gentleness. The weight of dawn and freedom lay upon them, but neither dared relax. Echo Pass had tested them. Rock slides, narrow ledges, treacherous bridges, and ambushes sculpted by greed. With each trial, Isadora felt her resolve solidify, no longer a fragile widow fleeing memory, but a traveler forging her fate. Beyond the pass, the landscape unfolded, rolling hills dotted with juniper, distant peaks crowned with snow, and far off, silhouettes of the railway's iron ribbon glinting in sunlight. Their destination lay beyond that line where wages waited, and the promise of home grew tangible. Isadora dismounted at a shallow creek where water gurgled over smooth stones. Cole joined her, hands freed as he knelt to fill his canteen. He passed it to her, their fingers brushing. She met his gaze. Next challenge? She asked, voice light with newfound confidence. He smiled, a rare, honest curve of lips. Crossing those tracks, trains don't slow for travelers. She laughed softly. Wouldn't expect them to. They refreshed their horses and packed their remaining provisions. Cole checked his colt, then retrieved the silver locket from her satchel, turning it in his fingertips. That belonged to someone, he murmured. Someone who had dreams, hopes, perhaps even family. Isadora's eyes softened. We all leave pieces of ourselves along the way. He nodded and secured the locket beneath his shirt, close to his heart. Let's not leave this behind. They mounted and set off across the grassland toward the distant railway. The wind carried hints of desert heat and wildflower perfume. Herds of antelope scattered at their approach, vanishing like ghosts at midday. They reached the tracks, parallel steel rails stretching to the horizon, sleepers sun-bleached and gravel-packed. A distant whistle drifted on the wind. A solemn summons. Cole held up a hand. We wait. They tethered the horses and lay prone beside a low embankment, dust and gravel prickling their palms. The whistle grew louder, heartbeats quickened, and then through the heat haze a steam locomotive appeared, smoke curling into the sky. Wheels rattled against steel in a growling crescendo. Isadora's heart thundered. She gripped Cole's arm, but his grip was sure. Look, he whispered. Through the open cars they glimpsed miners, bound for the northern fields, rough men with sun-scoured faces, pickaxes slung across shoulders. Among them, a figure paused mid-step, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat, shawl tied over a bulging belly. Isadora's breath caught. The carriage lurched past, and the woman raised a hand, recognition in her eyes. For a heartbeat, Isadora saw her own reflection in that passing glimpse, a pregnant traveler blending hope and hardship. The train receded, its whistle fading to a whisper. Isadora exhaled, eyes bright with tears she did not wipe away. Cole watched her, silent understanding in his gaze. She stood, brushing gravel from her skirt. A mirror of my own journey. He nodded. We're all pilgrims in our own stories. They waited until the rails lay quiet, then crossed with care. As they reached the far embankment, Cole paused, surveying the landscape ahead, a distant town's rising smoke, the promise of wages and a winter's shelter. Yet Isadora hesitated, hand drifting to her belly. This trip had been about survival. But now it transformed into something more, a quest for a legacy, a place to raise her child. She looked at Cole, expression resolute. I want more than just passage, I want a home. He studied her, gauging the depth of her desire. Then he smiled, warm with conviction. A home, he echoed. Then that's what we secure. Together, they rode toward the distant town, the wide sky above and the iron ribbon behind. Each step echoed with possibility, of wages earned, of dreams built, and of a palace of their making raised by a one-armed cowboy and the widow who dared to believe in tomorrow. The sun set low on the horizon, bathing the grasslands beyond Echo Pass in molten gold, as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins rode under the open sky. The trail beneath their horses dipped into rolling foothills that led toward Morrow's Crossing. Modest town nestled at the railroad's edge. Smoke traces curled from its chimneys, promising warmth and civilization. Isadora guided Tawny with measured reins, heart steady despite the ache in her side where last night's struggle left its mark. She glanced sideways at Cole. He sat tall in the saddle, the ghost of a scar flickering along his stump arm as he coaxed Scarlet forward. The raw tenderness of their bond had grown in these wild miles. Each moment forged trust, each danger a bead strung on the thread of their story. Ahead, Morrow's Crossing emerged from the haze, wood-framed storefronts lining a single main street, a water tower rising against sky. A handful of townspeople moved between buildings, pausing to watch. The riders approach. Word of their passage had spread, and curiosity flitted across every face. Cole reined Scarlet toward the general store's boardwalk. He offered Isadora a curt nod, gesturing to a bench by the porch. She dismounted, legs trembling, and he led. Tawny to water troughs carved from stone. Within the store, rugged shelves held sacks of flour, jars of preserves, and tins stamped with distant cities' names. The bell above the door jingled as Cole entered, followed by Isadora. Silence fell in expectant hush as townsfolk recognized the one-armed cowboy and the pregnant widow by his side. Martha Higgins, the store's proprietor, stepped forward. Her kindly face bore 1,000 small lines of laughter and worry. Cole Rollins, she said softly, voice equal parts relief and concern. We thought you'd never make it. Cole offered a slight bow. Good morning, Mrs. Higgins. I need supplies for the pass and the job ahead. She hurried behind the counter. What do you need? Flour? Bacon? Coffee? Isadora swallowed and spoke with steady resolve. All of those, and blankets for the night watch. We risk frost in the mountains. Martha nodded, eyes flicking. To Cole, Mr. Rollins, you've quite the reputation. Folks here speak of your legend and the widow you're escorting. Cole met her gaze. No legend here, just business. And she's no ordinary widow, she's fortune's new bearer. Gasps rippled through the store. Isadora's cheeks warmed. She gripped the counter, forcing calm. Martha placed coins on the counter. You'll need more than that. We'll open credit, give you time. Cole slid the locket onto the counter. Martha's eyes widened at the Empire Company brand. That's worth silver. He gave a curt nod. Promised to be back by week's end. Martha accepted the locket, sliding it into a small pouch. Consider this a down payment. Supplies were gathered swiftly. Sacks of flour, salted beef, tobacco, sturdy boots, oilskins, and woolen blankets dyed forest green. A fresh horseshoe for Scarlett's lame hoof was included, hammered on by the town blacksmith. Outside, Isadora fitted her new coat, the weight of cloth a luxury after days of tattered layers. Cole buckled new boots around his stump, flexing to test balance. He mounted Scarlett carefully, the fresh horseshoe clinking against wood. Isadora joined him. "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," she said, tipping her hat. "We won't forget your kindness." The townsfolk murmured blessings as they rode off, the mountain's ragged peaks rising before them. The trail out of Morrow's Crossing cut through open prairie, the railroad's iron spine humming beneath distant trains. Isadora watched smoke coils drift over the horizon, feeling the pull of progress and the echo of lives left behind. They crossed the tracks with ease, the whistle's call distant. Ahead lay one final stretch, the high ridge where the fort at. Echo Pass awaited their delivery of supplies and perhaps their destiny. As the sun climbed, Isadora felt fatigue settle in her bones. She guided Tawny to a spring-fed hollow beneath a lone juniper. Cole dismounted, collecting water in a tin cup and handing it to her. She drank deeply, the cool liquid soothing parched lips. "This feels like home already," she admitted, voice soft. Cole's gaze warmed. "Home's a place daring hearts build together," her breath caught. "Then let's build ours." He offered his hand. She took it, and in that touch lay a promise no contract could bind. Two souls bound by blood, loss, and a shared dream. Beyond the ridge, danger awaited, bandits, wilderness, perhaps betrayal. But for the moment, they were two riders on a sunlit plain, forging a future with every stride. And so, their journey pressed onward, toward a fort and a fate neither could predict. But together, they would stand unwavering, each breath a pledge to the life growing within, each hoofbeat a cadence of hope. The sky above the ridge bled pale pink as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins crested the final hill before the fort at Echo Pass. Below, the stockade walls rose from the earth timber palisades, framing a courtyard dotted with stacked crates and half-built tents. The fort buzzed with activity. Soldiers in faded blue jackets shouted orders, mules brayed, and the clang of hammers echoed against wood. Isadora's breath caught. Their journey's end glittered in dawn's glow, but something in the air felt taut expectation tinged with tension. She guided Tawny down the slope, hooves punching into packed dust. Cole followed, Scarlett matching each step with measured grace. His gaze swept the fort's ramparts, reading the men's postures, searching for danger hidden beneath routine. They entered through the main gate, where a sentry halted them with a rifle's press against his shoulder. "State your business." He barked. Cole's voice was steady. "Cole Rollins, delivery for Captain Benton. Flour, bacon, blankets, and urgent medical supplies." He held the tin telegram in plain sight. The sentry squinted at the worn paper. "Right, move on." He lowered his rifle and stepped aside. They threaded between supply wagons, spotting crates labeled Priority, Medical, and barrels stamped U.S. Army. A surgeon in stained linen issued orders under a canvas awning, while stretcher-bearers carried bundles of blankets. Cole guided Scarlett to a loading platform, where he began to offload flour sacks. Isadora joined him, her pregnant form bending to lift barrels of bacon and stacks of blankets. A voice interrupted the work. "Need a hand?" Isadora turned to see Private Rafe Collins, one of the fort's medics, young, earnest, his linen coat smeared with soot and blood. His gaze flicked to her belly with a sympathetic nod. She smiled weakly. "Thank you." Together they lifted crates to waiting hands, a chain of strangers united by duty. The sun climbed high, shadows shrinking beneath its heat. When the last crate was offloaded, Cole stood and dusted flour from his duster. He handed Isadora a water canteen. She drank gratefully, the afternoon heat prickling her cheeks. Captain Benton's voice rang out. "Rollins!" A tall man in captain's insignia strode forward, face lined by years of frontier command. He extended his hand. "Your supplies arrived just in time. We've had wounded near starvation and frostbite to the jaw." Cole nodded. "Just doing my job." The captain's gaze flicked from Cole to Isadora, then softened. "And you must be Mrs. Crane. Heard you made the ride without complaint. Our medic here can see to any strain." He motioned to the surgeon's tent. "After your rest, come by." Isadora managed a bowed nod. She felt exhaustion pooling in her bones, but steeled herself. This was more than delivery, it was a turning point. Captain Benton turned to leave but paused. "Your reward, $8 silver up front, the rest next week." Cole's eyes glimmered with relief. He offered a nod of thanks. Isadora watched the captain depart, then turned to Collins. "Thank you again," he shrugged, amused. "My mama's due in a few months too. Ain't no woman tougher than a mother." She laughed, genuine and warm. "Good to know." That evening, as the sun dipped below the Palisades, Cole found Isadora seated on a crate beneath a lantern's glow. Her hand rested protectively on her belly. He knelt before her, placing something small in her palm, the silver locket from the creek's pool. "Engraved with EC, I promised I'd not leave this behind," he said softly. She traced the initials. Eyes shining. What if EC had a family? "They lost this, but it found me." Cole took her hand. "Maybe it's meant to stay with you. A symbol that even when all seems lost, hope survives." She pressed the locket to her heart. Hope indeed. The fort settled into twilight. Watchmen patrolling ramparts, flickering lanterns in windows. The distant lament of a wounded man calling for water. Isadora leaned into Cole's warmth, strength and vulnerability mingling in her chest. He brushed her hair back. "We did it, Izzy." She met his gaze, voice steady. "We did." Under the pale stars, two lives converged. A widow with a child on the way, and a one-armed cowboy with a promise kept. Together, they had built a palace of purpose, one of flour sacks and survival, of silver pieces and trust, of scars born and love forged. As the night breeze whispered through the Palisades, Isadora felt the stir of new beginnings. The road behind had been perilous. The road ahead would demand even more. But with Colt by her side and life within her, she would walk any path. And so, beneath the watchful guard of Echo Pass, hope found its home in two hearts brave enough to believe. Mist curled around the timber walls of Echo Pass Fort like pale ghosts at dawn, and Isadora Crane stirred from a restless sleep on a rough-hewn cot inside the surgeon's tent. The scent of antiseptic mingled with pine smoke, and her belly, soft and rounded beneath her new wool gown, pressed against the blankets in slow, insistent thumps, tiny reminders of life entrusted to her care. Moments passed in dim quiet before she rose, ankles stiff, and tucked her skirts. Outside, the camp rattled to life, hammering echoing against logs, a murmur of voices, horses stamping in nearby corrals. She paused at the tent flap, bracing herself for the bustle of soldiers and the solemn weight of medical duty. Cole Rollins stood before the tent, one hand resting lightly on the stock of Scarlett's bridle as he spoke with Dr. Reynolds. The surgeon's pale face was carved with fatigue, but softened when he saw Isadora emerge. He offered her a small porcelain cup of weak tea. "Good morning, Mrs. Crane," Reynolds said quietly. "You did well, but rest is still crucial." She accepted the cup, the warmth seeping through chilled fingers. "Thank you, doctor. How are the others?" He cleared his throat. "Frostbite cases are stable, but we lost one man to gangrene. Supplies came at a good time." Isadora nodded, sipping the tart brew. She glanced at Cole, who met her gaze with a half-smile, and in that gesture, She sensed gratitude and something deeper, a shared recognition of all they'd endured. They rode out of the fort the morning after the delivery, guided by the pale promise of sun. As they retraced the trail toward Morrow's Crossing, the landscape shimmered under fresh snowmelt. Isadora rode tawny, the mare's gait smoother now that her hoof had been reshod. Scarlet followed, Sorrel's flanks flush and steady. The journey back to town felt different. Each tree and boulder carried memories of danger overcome. Isadora found herself scanning shadows not in fear, but in quiet appreciation of what remained. Life, love, a future. They paused at the plateau where wild roses had bloomed on their initial pass. Isadora dismounted and knelt to gather a small bouquet, brushing thorns aside. Cole watched, wind tugging at his duster, the sun catching silver in his hair. He approached and knelt beside her, his one hand cradling the roses. "For you," he said, softly placing the blooms in her lap, her breath caught. "Thank you, Cole." He brushed a petal free of snow and tucked it behind her ear. "Every step we've taken has a purpose. You're never alone in this journey." She smiled, the weight of gratitude blooming in her chest. "Nor you, sir." They remounted and rode the winding trail to Morrow's Crossing. Word of their safe return spread. Before them, townspeople lined the boardwalks, hats raised in salute, murmurs of praise following their passage. Some paused to admire her new coat, others to offer warm bread and stews. A group of women, eyes bright with curiosity, pressed forward to inspect her belly, their faces alight with questions and well wishes. Inside, the barn turned in run by. Mrs. Higgins, a feast awaited. Roasted chicken, honeyed root vegetables, fresh bread, and mugs of hot cider. Isadora settled at the long table, cheeks flushed by both heat and affection. Cole stood beside her, his presence a steady shield against the gentle onslaught of solicitous inquiries. "Mrs. Crane," Mrs. Higgins said, ladling stew into her bowl, "you must rest before you continue. Winter's near, and company's always welcome here." Isadora dipped her spoon. "Your kindness overwhelms me." Behind her sat Private Collins, offering slices of bread, and Dr. Reynolds lingered near the hearth, napkin draped over one arm, ready with advice but wary of overstepping. Cole raised his tankard. "To Mrs. Crane, may her child know only warmth and safety." Mugs clinked. Isadora felt tears prick at her eyes as the tavern's murmured cheer washed over her. She met Cole's eyes. "You almost missed this," she teased softly. "You nearly left. Me to face bandits alone." He feigned offense, hand over his heart. "I had to secure the fort and negotiate old debts." He winked. "Plus, I couldn't very well ask you to waltz into battle while I napped." Laughter rippled through the gathering, easing the lingering tension. As the meal wound down, Isadora slipped outside for fresh air. Snowflakes drifted like pale feathers, their touch cold on her cheeks. She wrapped herself in her wool coat and leaned against a post, eyes drifting to the stars beginning to pierce the twilight. Cole joined her quietly. Thinking ahead, she watched the sky. "I think of home, our home, what it will look like." Her voice was a whisper, fragile and determined. He rested an arm across her shoulders. "Tell me what you see." She closed her eyes, images unfolding. Log cabin warmed by hearth, a small cradle by the window, laughter echoing through pine-scented air. "I see a place built by two hands," she said, "where a child's first steps echo in safety, where winter's cold is kept at bay by love and fire." He smiled, pressing a tender kiss to her temple. "Then we shall build it." She turned, meeting the depth of his promise. Beyond the barn's yellow glow lay roads untold, the return to Dry Creek, the purchase of land, the labor of building. Danger still clung to the horizon, bandits on new trails, frost that threatened life, the ever-present uncertainty of motherhood in the wilderness, but they had weathered worse. Together. In that hush of falling snow, they shared a vow more, lasting than bullet or contract, to craft a palace not of stone or mortar, but of hope, resilience, and the unbreakable bond between two souls bound by loss and love. Dawn broke crisp and clear as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins set out from Morrow's Crossing toward Dry Creek, their hearts buoyed by the success at Echo Pass. The plains stretched endless around them, a sea of waving grasses pale from winters. First frost, each blade tipped silver by the chill of the night. Despite the cold, Isadora felt the warmth of purpose within her chest, a steady pulse matching the beat of Tawny's hooves. Cole rode Scarlet in the lead, eyes constantly scanning horizon and sky. He moved with responsive precision, the stump of his right arm a faint silhouette beneath his duster, a testament to past violence and the life he'd chosen anew. Isadora followed, the morning light catching her shawl's folds, gilding her hair like a promise. Their conversation broke the early quiet. "What will we call the place?" Isadora asked, voice soft against the breeze. She watched the sunrise paint the world in gold and rose. Cole spared her a glance, corners of his mouth lifting. "The Hearthstone Ranch?" he suggested. She tilted her head, considering. "For a home built from hardship and hope." "Exactly," he agreed. "Where every stone laid will remind us of what we've overcome." They rode in silence then, each lost in plans. The essence of home lived in their shared dreams. Log walls warm with hearth fire, windows open to woodland birdsong, and the cradle rocked by the door guarding the life she carried. By midday, the railroad glittered to their east, the distant whistle a clarion under open sky. They veered north, following the river's twisting course, seeking the fertile bottomlands Samuel had once admired in conversation before fever stole his breath. The ground here rose gentle and forgiving, grass soft beneath the horses' hooves. As they crossed a low ridge, Isadora pointed to a cluster of cottonwoods lining the riverbank, their bare branches etched against sky. "There," she said, "where the river slows where Samuel wanted to build." Cole guided Scarlet alongside Tawny to the banks. The river's waters ran clear, polished stones whispering beneath the current. He dismounted, offering Isadora the reins. "Show me." She stepped down and waded to a flat stretch of meadow where the ground tilted to the river. Knee-deep in grass, she turned to Cole, her gaze both fierce and tender. "Here, this is where we raise our home." He joined her, scanning the land, the shelter of hills behind, the bend of the river before, and a line of juniper and pine promising firewood in winter. He nodded. "It is good." She smiled, relief and joy rippling through her. "We should mark it." Cole reached into his coat pocket, pulling out a small silver flask engraved with the Empire Company crest, a reminder of past debts paid and new beginnings earned. He twisted the cap free and poured a stream of bourbon onto a flat stone nestled by the water's edge, letting the amber liquid mingle with river's flow. "To hearth and home," he said, voice rich with ritual. Isadora touched the flask's side. "To life." They shared a silent pact as the whiskey fragmented into the current, dissolving into memory and promise. She reached for the soil, pressing her palm to the ground. Grainy earth pressed between her fingers, the foundation of tomorrow. Cole watched her hand, memory flickering in his slate-gray eyes. He bent and drew from his saddlebag a small iron hammer and chisel, tools salvaged from a prospector's kit. With deliberate care, he carved their initials, IC and CR, into the stone beside the offering. Isadora knelt beside him, laying her hand over his as he worked. "Every mark we leave," she whispered, "stands against time." He paused, pressing her palm to the fresh etching. "And time cannot wash away what we build together." Their breath mingled in the cold air as they stood and surveyed the meadow. Ahead lay forests to be felled, walls to raise, hearths to kindle. Behind lingered Echo Pass's scars, towns made richer by their deeds. Between past and future, they planted themselves firmly in the present, They mounted again, riding back along the river's bend toward their future construction site. Each hoofbeat was a drumbeat of purpose, echoing the life within her, and the quiet strength of a man who chose to stand by her side. The sky arched wide as they returned to Dry Creek, where boards and nails awaited and a gathering of hands ready to build more than a house's sanctuary. In that moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as the pregnant widow and the one-armed cowboy approached the land that would become their palace, crafted not of marble or mortar, but of faith, resilience, and love unfailing. The morning sun pierced the frosty air as Isadora Crane and Cole Rawlins rode north from Morrow's Crossing, their breath misting in the chill. Every hoofbeat on the packed earth resonated with purpose. Each carried them closer to the land they would call Hearthstone. The open plain stretched before them, gold and russet under a sky so vast it made one's worries seem small. Isadora guided Tawny through dew-damp grasses, her heart buoyed by the day's promise. The stretch they traveled felt lighter than any mile before. Each ridge they crested unveiled deeper prospects, stands of cedar for timber, clay-rich earth for adobe, and clear springs hidden in meadows. Cole rode Scarlet, one arm thrown across the saddle horn, the other at rest by his side as he pointed out landmarks. "There," he said, voice steady. "That rise overlooks the valley floor ideal for laying out the cabin's foundation." Isadora dismounted, the mare's flank warm under her glove. She walked to the crest, the world unfurling below, fields of golden grass sloping gently to a ring of willows beside the river's curve. The wind whispered through the sedges, carrying the tang of pond scum and wild mint. "Breathe it in," Cole murmured, joining her. "This is our canvas." She closed her eyes and exhaled, the wind rattling her shawl. "It feels like freedom." He nodded, the ghost of a smile curving his lips. Freedom built by calloused hands and hands wrapped around a family's future. Isadora accessed her satchel, pulling out the telegram slip from the cabin. The scraps of ink, instructions for a clandestine rendezvous in Echo Pass, had led them here. She read its words aloud, voice quiet with wonder. 3 pines mark the boundary. Dig where the moon's shadow falls at noon. Cole's eyes flicked to the tree's tall pines clustered at the river's bend. He touched one and wiped a dark smudge from its bark. "Looks like someone prepped for a buried cache." Isadora knelt by a flat stone at the tree's base. Beneath the surface, soft earth beckoned. She dug with gloved hands, rich soil turning in her palms. Soon, the edge of a wooden box appeared. A thrill of discovery flashed through her, a promise. Unsealed. Cole knelt beside her, working at the bindings until the box surfaced. It was weathered but sturdy, its iron bands rusted into curls. Inside lay a small pile of gold coins, their faces worn but unmistakable, and a faded scratch of a map lines tracing routes to hidden yesterdays and unspoken debts. Isadora's breath caught. Gold. Cole's gaze was both wary and thoughtful. Enough to buy land and more, but these coins belonged to someone else. She pressed a hand to her chest. Or someone who hoped a stranger would find them. He closed the box gently and stood. "We'll use the gold to secure Hearthstone, no less. But the map, it whispers of unfinished journeys. Maybe it'll guide us later." Isadora wiped dirt from her gloves. "First, our home." They distributed the coins between their satchels, mindful of the map. The weight felt heavy, hope gilded by responsibility. As they stood, a movement at the tree line caught Cole's eye. Figures approaching on horseback, dust plumes rising behind them. Isadora's pulse quickened. Cole's hand drifted to his colt. The strangers carried lariats and wide-brimmed hats. They halted at a respectful distance, tipping their hats in courtesy rather than confrontation. One rider stepped forward, a woman draped in a patched duster, one hand hooked on her saddle horn, the other resting on a revolver's butt. "Cole." "Rawlins," she intoned, voice firm. Heard you're staking claim on these flats. Cole squared his shoulders. We are. The woman's gaze flicked to Isadora, then back to Cole. Name's Marcella Tate. My folks laid claim before the railroad came through. We've a right to this ground. Isadora's heart pounded. Claim jumpers meant danger, but also negotiation. She slid from Tawny and wiped her hands on her skirts before stepping forward. Mrs. Tate, she began, voice respectful but unwavering. This land is meant for more than blood feuds. We've carried supplies for troops in need and braved dangers no map can show. We come as partners, not invaders. Marcella studied her, then nodded slowly. Talk like you mean it. My folks need winter's rent, 3 blankets and a share of crops. You got gold enough. You pay, and the claim's yours. Cole dipped his head. Fair. He drew a coin and offered it to Marcella. This is earnest. We'll build a home that honors the land and those who came before. Marcella pocketed the coin, then nodded to her riders. Welcome to Hearthstone, Mr. Rollins, Mrs. Crane. Best of luck spinning your palace in these flats. They turned and rode away, leaving Isadora and Cole standing by the pines. The afternoon sun caught the map's edges in Isadora's satchel. Cole exhaled. That went smoother than a gunfight. Isadora smiled, relief and excitement mingling. Seems even the wild bows to good intentions. They mounted, hearts lighter despite the day's toil. Ahead lay planks and nails, logs to fell and walls to raise. Behind them, evidence that old debts could be repaid and new alliances forged. Together, they rode back toward the ridge hand in hand, dreams in their hearts, and the promise of Hearthstone shining brighter than gold. Sunlight glinted off the newly felled logs stacked at the edge of the clearing, casting long hopeful shadows across the frosted grass. Isadora Crane stood beside Cole Rollins, hands wrapped in woolen gloves, surveying their promised land, Hearthstone Ranch's future homestead. The air smelled of pine sap and promise. They had enlisted help from Morrow's Crossing lumberjacks, blacksmiths and townsfolk curious to witness the legend of the one-armed cowboy and the pregnant widow. Now the clearing buzzed with activity. Axes rang against trunks, saws bit into cedar, and hammers rang out like declarations of purpose. Isadora inhaled, breath catching in her throat at the sight. Logs lay in neat rows, foundations marked, and a cadre of workers stood ready. She felt the warmth of community ignite her heart. Cole, perched atop a logseld, called out instructions with authority and kindness, balancing his Colt belt atop his saddle horn. The stump of his arm, wrapped in a leather harness, flexed as he guided a team dragging timbers to the foundation stakes. Isadora moved among the workers, her shawl fluttering in the wind as she handed out gloves and piping hot coffee. She offered encouragement. Steady now, each beam holds our future. Her voice carried above the din, soft yet unwavering. A young blacksmith, broad-shouldered with soot-streaked face, paused mid-swing. Mrs. Crane, you sure you don't want to take a seat? You've earned a rest. Isadora smiled, cheeks flushed. I'll rest once these walls rise. She swept back a lock of hair. After all, a home built by idle hands is just a dream. Beside her, Cole climbed down and offered his assistance. He knelt, shouldering a half-ton log with 2 men at his side. The timber groaned but yielded to his grit, proof that legend was rooted in reality. Emotion swelled in Isadora's chest. She placed a supportive hand on Cole's shoulder. Thank you, she said, voice thick with gratitude. He met her gaze, eyes shadowed by both love and determination. We're building more than a cabin, he replied. We're building a legacy. Their day unfolded in rhythms of labor, measuring, cutting, lifting, and nailing. Each log laid cemented there. Shared dream. Sweat froze on brows, breath puffed in the cold, but no one faltered. Their combined will forged each timber into walls that would soon shelter life. At noon, a horn sounded. Lunch break. Workers gathered around tables heaped with stew, freshly baked bread, and smoked fish. Isadora ladled soup into tin bowls, handing them out with gentle smiles as Cole distributed slices of jerky and mugs of cider. They sat together beneath a spruce, sharing a silent moment amid the bustle. Isadora sipped her soup, savoring the taste of home yet to come. Cole watched her, admiration etched in every line of his face. "Look at them," she said softly, nodding at the workers crowding the clearing. "They came when we asked." His hand covered hers. "Because you asked. Courage inspires courage." She blinked back tears. "And you led the way." Beyond the clearing, thunder rolled. Dark clouds gathered, an unexpected storm creeping. Across the plains, Cole rose, scanning the sky. "They'll need cover." Isadora stood as well. "The roof's not on yet." He nodded sharply. "Time to get wet or get shelter." They sprang into action. Workers rushed to secure tools under tarps. Horses were led to temporary shelters, and logs were lashed in place. Isadora and Cole moved through the gathering gloom like guardians, offering directions and hands where needed. Rain began in fat, stinging drops. The first drops spattered on exposed skin, then transformed into a relentless downpour. Workers dashed under a tarp strangler's tent. Some clung to beams, securing tarps and canvas covers over the future. Cabin skeleton. Cole and Isadora worked side by side, drenched but undeterred. Cole jammed a beam into place as rain sluiced over his duster, its leather shining slick. Isadora handed him nails and hammer. Her shawl plastered to her back. Lightning split the sky. Isadora gasped. A bolt struck a nearby boulder, a fiery crack that sent stones rattling. Instinct propelled her into Cole's arms. He held her close, shielding her with his wounded shoulder. The storm's fury raged around them, wind howled. Rain lashings stung, and thunder bellowed. But inside that embrace, time stilled. Life pulsed in her womb, a gentle flutter against Cole's chest. He tightened his arms, whispering reassurances. As quickly as it arrived, the storm spent its wrath. The clouds dispersed, granting a shaft of light that turned each raindrop into diamonds. The workers emerged, faces lifted to the sky in silent awe. Cole released Isadora and surveyed the sheltering tarp held over the cabin's framework. The roof was secure, the walls weather-tight for now. The structure stood defiantly against the elements, a testament to human will. He approached Isadora, rain droplets sparkling on her lashes like stars. "We did it," he said, voice hoarse with exertion and relief. She nodded, trembling with cold and triumph. "A palace built with bare hands." He brushed a lock of drenched hair from her face. "And with two hearts." In that moment, amidst the sodden logs and weary but jubilant workers, the first true walls of Hearthstone Ranch rose, a fortress against nature's fury, and a cradle for life's tender promise. And beneath the shelter of their combined strength, Isadora felt the stir of hope deeper than any storm's fury could extinguish. Sunlight filtered through the frost-laden pines as Isadora Crane and Cole Rollins rode back toward Hearthstone Ranch, hauling freshly milled lumber and supplies the town smithy had fashioned: iron hinges, nails, and a sturdy lockbox for valuables. The morning air held the scent of wood smoke and damp earth. Each breath reminded Isadora of the life within her, child's quiet flutter resonating with every gallop. The homestead clearing came into view, a skeleton of beams rising from the foundations they'd laid in the first thaw of spring. Workers had paused to greet them, faces bright with purpose. Today they would raise walls, and perhaps, if the sky held a roof by sunset. Isadora dropped the reins for a moment, pressing boots into the soft earth. "Cole," she called, voice clear across the bustle. He turned, Scarlett's ears flicking forward. She approached the skeletal frames, tracing the beams with gloved fingers. Her gaze turned upward to the north ridge, where the river curved. Here their cabin would face east, to greet dawn's first rays. Cole rode up behind her. He dismounted, adjusting his saddlebag with the lockbox strapped inside. "Got the hardware," he said, lifting the box to show the kettle-gray iron gleaming. In sunlight, she smiled, warmth flooding her. "You're a treasure hunter as well as a cowboy." He chuckled, lowering the box. "Let's put it to work." They set to task, hammering hinges, fitting doors, and raising planks. The workers followed their lead, men and women wielding tools. With combined strength, laughter and chatter filled the air, punctuated by the rhythmic ring of hammer on steel. As midday approached, Isadora paused to catch her breath, brushing damp hair from her forehead. Her gaze found Cole across the clearing. He was guiding two men as they lifted a heavy crate. She could see the strain etched in his slate eyes, yet he refused assistance, determined they succeed. Fingers unconsciously rested on her belly, and she smiled at the swell of life there. A soft breeze carried the promise of summer, birdsong drifting from the pines, the distant murmur of the river framed by budding foliage. Cole noticed her watching and stepped toward her, wiping sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his duster. He offered her water in a tin cup. She drank gratefully, then returned the cup and touched his arm. "Thank you," she said, voice soft. He studied her, concern mingled with admiration. "You're doing fine. One more wall, then we can rest." She nodded, drawing strength. "One more." They worked through the afternoon, setting planks and sealing gaps with tar and cloth. The wood, once rough and winter-chilled, took on warmth as it absorbed the sun's rays and the kindness of many hands. When the final plank slid into place, a cheer rose, a salute to progress. The front wall stood proud, doors hung and swing smoothly on their new hinges. Windows framed the horizon like welcoming eyes. Isadora stepped inside the new room, the floor still bare-axed boards and sawdust underfoot. She ran her hand across the wall, the wood's grain like the lines of her own palm. Paths of toil, resilience, and fate. Cole followed, closing the door behind them. He reached for her waist, pulling her close so the plank walls concealed their world. His hand rested on her belly, caressing where life stirred. "Cole," she whispered. Turning in his arms, he brushed a soft kiss on her temple. "Drinks and supper by the hearth before night falls?" Her laughter was gentle. "It'll be perfect." They exited, returning outside to rain blessings on the homestead's first shelter. The workers assembled, and beyond them, horses nickered. The river's distant rush echoed life's rhythm. As dusk approached, Cole built a fire near the cabin's entrance. The flames danced against the pine shadows. Isadora set 2 mugs of mulled cider on a nearby stump. He handed one to her, the warmth seeping through her gloves. Together they watched the sun's last blaze, the first real roof over their heads etched in orange glow. She nestled against him, head on his shoulder. "This is only the beginning," she murmured. He kissed her hair. "The best is yet to come." Behind them, Hearthstone's walls whispered a promise that in a cabin born of struggle and sweat, a mother would cradle her child, a cowboy would guard his family, and a home would stand as the greatest palace 2 hearts could build. Dawn's light broke across the horizon as mist swirled low in the valley where Hearthstone Ranch would soon stand. Isadora Crane stirred atop Tawny, the mare's breath billowing in plumes of steam. She blinked against the pale gold sky and saw Cole Rawlins already stirring scarlet. The crisp air carried birdsong, a hymn to new beginnings. Today, they would install the roof's beams and begin the finishing touches: window frames, shutter hinges, and the hearth stonework. But first, they had unfinished business. A meeting with Marcella Tate to welcome her as neighbor and partner in shaping this land. Cole joined her at the ridge's crest. His eye followed hers to the cluster of pines marking the claim's border. Marcella awaited under the tallest tree, mounted on a chestnut mare with her brother at her side. As they rode closer, the morning wind carried the clash of metal, Tate's rider tapping a lance against saddle. Isadora dismounted, her skirts brushing frost-laced grass. She met Marcella with outstretched hand. "Good morning, Mrs. Tate." Marcella returned the handshake with firm grip. "Morning, Mrs. Crane. Thought I'd check how Hearthstone fared after last night's storm." Cole dismounted and inclined his head to Marcella's brother, a lean man with wary eyes. "All is well. The storm tested our walls, but the ranch stood true." Marcella nodded, gaze sweeping the framing logs and secured roof beams. Her brother holstered his lance and handed it to Cole. "Then I'll lend my tools. My folks offer themselves as your first ranch hands." Isadora's heart leapt. "Your family's help means more than gold." She gestured toward the cabin's walls. "With every plank we secure, Hearthstone grows closer to home." Cole accepted the lance and slung it over his shoulder. "Together, we build stronger neighbor and friend." Marcella's lips curved. "Neighbors, yes. Friends, perhaps yet. But can't have too many legends in one valley." Laughter broke across them as the workers gathered to greet the Tates. The early chill lifted under shared camaraderie. All day they worked in unison. Tate's kin raising rafters, the Rollins Crane team fitting crossbeams, and Isadora marking plaster lines for window frames. The morning's solemn hush gave way to the symphony of saws, hammers, and voices in friendly rivalry. At noon, they paused beneath the cabin's skeletal shade. Cole handed Isadora a tin plate heaped with smoked venison and sweetbread, and she offered slices of fresh cheese in return. Marcella's brother fetched cool spring water, ladling it into their cups. They sat on a beam, legs swinging. Isadora savored the taste of fellowship. The ranchlands had claimed them all of them as her new family. As afternoon shadows lengthened, they hoisted the final ridgepole, a massive cedar beam spanning the cabin's length. Cole and Marcella guided it aloft as others steadied it with ropes. Isadora and her workers secured it to the wall plates with iron brackets hammered fast by Cole's steady hand. When the pole sat true, they stood together beneath it, emblems of promise etched in sweat and laughter. Their breaths rose in smoky swirls. Marcella stepped forward, voice carrying, "By this beam, I pledge neighborly aid and shared prosperity, from this dawn till dusk and beyond." Isadora mirrored the vow. "By this beam, I pledge hearth and home, guarding Hearthstone's gates and caring for your kin as my own." Cole placed his hand over Isadora's, sealing their oath. "By this beam, I pledge my arm and heart to protect this land and all who call it home." They clasped hands in unison, a circle of allyship beneath the fresh timber arch. Their pledges echoed across the mountain air, an anthem for a community born in hardship but blossoming in unity. As sun dipped to the western ridge, they turned to the cabin's entrance. Isadora's belly pressed against the timber, her child moving strong with life. She smiled at the future coiled within. Cole offered his arm. "Shall we?" She took it, and together they entered the doorway of Hearthstone Ranch, ready to build not just a home, but a legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering hope. A week of sunlight and labor had transformed Hearthstone Ranch's skeletal walls into a sturdy home. Wooden siding sealed against the wind, window shutters painted a deep pine green, and the hearth's stone chimney rising like a promise against the sky. Isadora Crane stepped onto the threshold, her belly heavy with life and anticipation. She ran a hand across the fresh whitewash that covered the walls, the smooth surface reflecting her determination. Cole Rollins stood nearby, arms crossed as he surveyed their creation. His stump arm bore the faint shadow of a fresh scar where it had been strapped into braces during the build proof of his dedication. Despite the cut and bruise, his gaze was soft as he watched Isadora's careful inspection. Inside, the cabin smelled of pine and fresh plaster. Sunlight streamed through the east-facing windows, warming the oak floors and revealing the honeyed hue of the wood. Isadora moved slowly through the rooms, each step a prayer of hope. In the corner of the main room stood the cradle, a simple pine frame Isadora had crafted herself, lined with a swath of cloth dyed in gentle lavender. She pressed her hand to her belly, whispering, "Almost time, little one." Cole entered behind her, a cloth bundle in hand. He unwrapped it to reveal handcrafted quilts, their patches stitched with care and emblazoned with the initials HRC. Each square told a story: the silver locket's brand, a cedar tree for the pass, a rose for the plateau where they'd once paused, and the emblem of the railroad for the journeys that carried them here. "These are for you and our child," Cole said, voice gravel soft. He laid the quilts across the cradle's rails. Isadora's breath caught. "They're beautiful." He lingered, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Just like you." Her cheeks warmed. She turned her gaze to the floorboards polished by winters. First sunlight. Outside, smoke drifted lazily from the chimneys of distant cabins, but Hearthstone's windows glowed with their own warmth. A sudden gust rattled the shutters. Isadora's heart fluttered. Was it the wind, or something more? She crossed to the window and peered out, eyes narrowing against the glare. Across the fields, a dust cloud rose too distant for horses' passage, too low for a storm. She stepped back, concern rippling through her. Cole joined her, one hand on her shoulder. He studied the cloud. Riders. Isadora's pulse quickened. Strangers? He squared his jaw. Possibly. "Stay here." He moved to the door, Colt in hand. Isadora followed, shawl around her shoulders. Outside, two riders emerged from the haze, one a lone cowboy on a gray mare, the other a messenger with a satchel slung across his back. They trotted to the gate, the wind carrying tense voices. The first rider dismounted, boots crunching frost. He was lean, his face sunburned and lined with hardship. He tipped his hat. "Evening, Mr. Rollins. Saw the smoke came to check on my contract." Cole's eyes narrowed. "Your contract?" The man's gaze shifted to Isadora, then back to Cole, the railroad company. "Payment for delivering the medicine crates to Echo Pass. They say you never delivered." Isadora's heart sank. The past's debt still clung. Cole's hand dropped to the locket under his vest. "I delivered." "The fort surgeon can confirm." The rider's stern gaze softened slightly. He reached into his satchel, producing a sheaf of papers. "Then sign here, and here. The ledger's blank without your signature." Cole took the ledger, ink-stained fingers steady. He scanned the entries, quantities, dates, signatures, each matched by Captain Benton's seal. He signed, then offered the ledger back. The rider nodded curtly. "All clear. Deliveries fulfilled. My apologies for the trouble." As he mounted to leave, the messenger stepped forward, satchel in hand. He bowed to Isadora with solemn respect. "Letter for Mrs. Crane from Governor Hollister." Isadora took the letter, glancing at Cole in silent question. He nodded encouragement. She opened the envelope to reveal an official seal and Governor Hollister's elegant script. "My dear Mrs. Crane," she read aloud. "Your courage and tenacity in supporting our troops and settlers amid chaos have not gone unnoticed. It is my honor to commission Hearthstone Ranch as a safe haven and grant you a land patent. You and Mr. Rollins may call this land yours in perpetuity. May your home stand as a beacon of hope to all who journey through these rugged lands." Tears sprang to her eyes. She looked at Cole, words failing. His voice cracked with pride. "You built more than a home. You built a legacy." She pressed the letter to her heart, the crackling seal warm beneath her fingers. "Our legacy." The wind died, leaving only the hush of promise in the fields. Hearthstone Ranch stood renewed, its walls complete, its future assured, its hearth ready to cradle life. And within its depths, two souls, one armed, one with new life, shared the reward of perseverance, their palace not built of stone or gold, but of faith, resilience, and the unwavering bonds of family. Thin light of dawn filtered through the cabin's east windows as Isadora Crane stirred from sleep, her senses tingling with anticipation. The hush of Hearthstone Ranch lay around her, the deep wood-beamed ceiling overhead, the soft glow of embers in the hearth, and the wood floors creaking beneath her weight as she rose. Each step to the cradle where the quilts lay was a prayer and a promise. Cole Rollins stood by the hearth, duster folded over a chair, stump arm free but guarded at his side. He watched her with a blend of pride and tender concern that stilled her heart with warmth. "You ready?" he asked softly, voice gentle. Isadora placed a hand on her belly where the baby's flutter had shifted to a steady pulse. "Yes," she whispered, "today." The cabin door creaked, announcing the arrival of Dawn's workers. A soft knock, then Marcella Tate peered inside, flour dust on her boots, a small basket of fresh eggs cradled in her arms. "Morning, Mrs. Crane," Marcella said, stepping in with careful reverence. "Thought you might need these." Isadora accepted the basket, eyes shining. "Thank you. I couldn't ask for better friends." Marcella nodded, turning to Cole. "Everything set outside?" "I brought Dr. Reynolds's herbs and clean linens." Cole tipped his hat. "Ever ready. Thank you." Marcella slipped away, and Isadora and Cole exchanged a look of shared awe. Hearthstone's community stood ready, hearts aligned like timber, beams ready to bear the weight of life's storms. Labor came gently at first, soft cramps rolling through Isadora's back. She wrapped her arms around the cradle's edge, breathing through each wave of pain as Cole knelt beside her, chalking lines on the floor to measure progress by steps and breaths. The morning sun climbed higher. Outside, workers paused in their tasks, raising fences, tending horses, omens of caution spilling through shutter slats. A hush blanketed the ranch. Mulch shovels lay idle, the ring of hammers ceased, and a solitary hawk circled overhead as if heralding life's new chapter. Isadora's breathing deepened as each tightening wave built. She grasped Cole's hand, the rough calluses grounding her. "I'm scared," she confessed, voice a tremor of vulnerability. He brushed a strand of hair from her sweat-damp brow. "You're not alone. I'm here." She nodded, tears brimming. The ritual of life and death, of love and fear, filled the cabin with sacred weight. Marcella re-entered with Dr. Reynolds and Private Collins. The surgeon's calm eyes met Isadora's with steady reassurance. He laid out herbs in a basin of warmed water and arranged clean linens on the cot beside the cradle. "Ready when you are, Mrs. Crane," he said quietly. The next hours passed in a dance of labor and compassion, each contraction giving way to respite. Cole produced bowls of broth sweetened with honey and tends to Isadora's comfort, pressing cold compresses to her brow and whispering strength. At length, the final wave broke, powerful, consuming. Isadora's palms pressed into Collins's as she summoned every ounce of will. A sudden cry broke the hush, the baby's first breath. Isadora collapsed back as Marcella caught the newborn in swaddling cloth, brushing vernix from rosy cheeks. Cabin held its collective breath as Marcella placed the infant in Isadora's arms. The womb's hush crashed into life's wild cry. Isadora gasped, tears and joy mingling as she gazed at the tiny face framed in quilted blankets and Cole's locket chain, his first gift to the child he'd never hold with two hands, but with a full heart. Cole knelt, eyes moist, as Dr. Reynolds cleaned the baby's face and checked tone and vigor. She was healthy, strong lungs crying, fists curling around the quilt. Isadora raised a trembling hand to touch her daughter's cheek. The baby's eyes opened emerald pools, reflecting wood and flame. "You're here," Isadora whispered. Cole rose and cradled her shoulder. "She's perfect." Outside, the ranch exhaled. Hammers rang once to resume work. The forge's bellows sighed again, and the stirring of life resumed its rhythmic pulse. Isadora, swaddled to her chest, stood and crossed the cabin to lay the baby in the cradle by the hearth. Marcella draped a quilt over her, humming a lullaby. Workers gathered at the doorway, eyes bright, smiles gentle, silent blessing in their gaze. Cole stepped forward, voice ringing with quiet triumph. "Meet our daughter, Amelia Crane Rollins." A cheer rose, soft and reverent, echoing through log walls. Amelia's cry wove into the raising din a new melody for Hearthstone Ranch. Isadora sank onto the hearth's bench, exhaustion and elation weaving through her veins. She pressed her cheek to the cradle rail, breath slow and steady. As Amelia nestled against the quilt's Cole knelt beside her, placing a gentle kiss on her crown. "Our palace is built," he said, voice husky. She looked up, eyes shining. "But the real home begins here." He slipped an arm around her shoulders, guided her to lean into him. Together, they watched their daughter life's living promise. Wrapped in lavender quilts and golden hope. Beyond the cabin, the world resumed its work. Cattle lowed in fields, grain rustled in silos, and the distant whistle of a passing train carried the promise of future journeys. But in Hearthstone's cabin, time stood still, two hands, one heart, and new life forging an unbreakable bond. Under the watchful beams of their home, Isadora and Cole welcomed the dawn of their greatest story, motherhood in partnership, of a palace not built by stone, but by the enduring strength of human will and the power of love's resilient embrace. Morning broke over Hearthstone Ranch with a gentle hush, dew glinting on the fledgling crops planted beneath the cabin's east windows. Isadora Crane emerged from the doorway, wrapped in a shawl that brushed the newly laid garden beds, her breath misting in the crisp air. The quilted cradle stood empty inside, silent testimony to last night's miracle. But her heart brimmed with a new chapter. Cole Rollins followed with 2 steaming mugs of coffee, the aroma of roasted beans mingling with pine smoke. He handed one to Isadora, settling beside her on the porch rail. The ranch lay before them, fences sturdy and straight, the barn's timbers gleaming against a sky still streaked with dawn's gold. "Look at it," Isadora breathed, her eyes tracing the lines of their labor garden beds ready for seeds, a small pen for goats, and the distant outline of a corral for horses. "It's our promise made real." Cole nodded, his gaze steady and proud. "Every log, every nail, every seed we plant, it's ours." She sipped her coffee, warmth easing her shoulders. "What's left today?" she asked. He glanced toward the barn. "Finish the goat pen, mend the fence by the north gate, and help Marcella's boys with the water trough." Isadora set her mug on the rail. "Let's get to it." They climbed down, boots crunching on frost-hardened earth. As they reached the barn, a shout rang out, a delivery wagon rattling up the lane, its canvas cover brush-stroked by daylight. Isadora's pulse quickened. She and Cole exchanged a glance. Routine arrivals at Hearthstone were rare now. They hurried forward as the wagon halted by the fence. A young courier leapt down, unstrapping a satchel. He carried a cedar box sealed with red wax bearing the Empire Company crest. Cole stepped forward. "Morning, got mail?" he called. The courier nodded, handing Cole an envelope marked with Governor Hollister's seal. Isadora's breath stilled. Cole opened it, his eyes scanning. At the end, he closed the letter and looked up. Invited to the governor's inaugural ball, recognition for the fort's success and Hearthstone's hospitality. Isadora blinked at him. "A ball?" He smiled, handing her the letter. She read, "Your contributions to frontier settlement and unwavering spirit must be honored. Attend as our guests of honor." She tucked the letter into her coat, the firelight of achievement kindling her chest. "A ball means dancing with a gown?" Cole chuckled, offering her his arm. "If you dress like you build a home, they'll step aside." They laughed, the sound ringing across the ranch. Workers paused to watch their leaders delight rare levity before the day's toil resumed. Later, after securing the goat pen and greeting Marcella's boys, Isadora retreated inside to freshen for the evening. She stood before the mirror. Cole had mounted a simple oak frame, but her reflection held regal dignity. She adjusted the shawl around her shoulders, the fabric's pattern recalling the quilts embroidered by friends. Cole entered, dressed in his best duster, freshly brushed, coat polished, and a silver locket at his neck. He carried her swaddled daughter in one arm, the other presenting a folded shirt he'd pressed for her. "You look stunning," he said softly. Isadora took the shirt and draped it over the cradle. "So do you." She knelt, placing a gentle kiss on Amelia's forehead. "Your first ball awaits." Amelia cooed, tiny fingers grasping at the air. Cole lifted Isadora's hand to his lips. "Shall we?" She rose, letting him guide her outside, where Marcella and the Tates waited in horse-drawn carriages, scarves wrapped against evening chill. The path to Morrow's Crossing lay lit by lanterns hung from fence posts, casting a golden procession toward the town's grand hall. As they rode, townsfolk lined the route, clapping and cheering for the widow and her cowboy, for the child, and the ranch they built from dust. Inside the grand hall, lanterns sparkled off crystal and polished wood. Governor Hollister greeted them beneath a banner of white magnolias. Isadora, holding Cole's hand, felt the weight of many gazes: admiration, respect, and perhaps a touch of envy. But in his steady grip and her daughter's soft breathing, she found her center. The governor raised a glass. "To Mrs. Crane and Mr. Rollins, pioneers of promise on these rugged frontiers." Glasses clinked. Isadora glanced at Cole and Amelia, then took a breath and stepped onto the dance floor, her steps guided by Cole's sure hand. They danced to a soft fiddle tune, the world spinning in gentle harmony. Isadora smiled, eyes closed, swaying to the music. In that moment, memory of passion and peril melted into celebration. Their palace of hope stood not on stone, but on the unyielding strength of a widow, the steadfast courage of a one-armed cowboy, and the luminous promise of a child's first waltz. Spring's full wash of green unfurled across Hearthstone Ranch as Isadora Crane stepped onto the porch with her daughter, Amelia, cradled against her chest in a lavender shawl. The morning sun warmed the freshly painted shutters and honeyed. Light streamed through the windows across the polished oak floor they had laid by hand. Life had settled into rhythms of laughter and labor, goats grazing in fenced meadows, chickens pecking in garden beds, and the steady hum of the river beyond their fields. Cole Rollins emerged from the barn, his gait sure despite the lingering phantom pain of his missing arm. In one hand, he carried a polished revolver for routine checks, and in the other, a satchel stuffed with maps and ledger books. His eyes slate gray and steady lit at the sight of his wife and daughter. "Morning, my heart," he greeted, voice soft with affection. Isadora leaned into him, one arm looped around his waist. Amelia stirred against her chest, the babe's bright eyes shining as she cooed. "Morning," Isadora replied, pressing Amelia's cheek to Cole's jacket. "Did you get the survey finished?" He nodded, stepping closer and tucking the satchel away. "Taxes filed, boundary pinned. Hearthstone's official deed arrives with the mail coach tomorrow." She smiled, the weight of worry lifted by his diligence. "Then everything is right and settled." Cole's gaze swept the horizon. A series of outbuildings, smokehouse, springhouse, and tool shed, speckling the edge of their fields. Beyond, the forest rolled like a promise of firewood and lumber. The cabin's roof, gleaming with new shakes, stood like a sentinel amid the green. His hand brushed Amelia's blanket. "Have you thought about teaching her to ride by next summer?" Isadora's laugh was soft and joyful. "She's already tried to nibble the reins. She's got the spirit." Their reverie was broken by a distant rumble, the mail coach's call. A plume of dust rose along the lane, and a solitary rider came into view, the mail courier from Morrow's Crossing. Jouncing on his mount. Cole exchanged a knowing look with Isadora. He stepped forward, hand outstretched as the courier pulled up by the fence. In his gloved hand, he held a wooden parcel wrapped in brown paper. "For Mr. and Mrs. Rollins, the courier announced, tipping his hat. Then, best wishes from Governor Hollister. Cole accepted the parcel and beckoned the courier to a trough. As the horse nibbled water, Cole turned to Isadora. With a soft smile, he sliced the twine and peeled back the paper. Inside lay a finely engraved brass plaque, Hearthstone Ranch established 1885, a beacon of hope in the frontier. Isadora's breath caught. She traced the brass letters with a reverent finger. Cole lifted the plaque, and together they carried it to the cabin's front wall. With hammered brackets, they mounted it beside the entrance, above a garland of wild roses and cedar boughs. The sun glinted off the brass as Cole stepped back, surveying their home, a palace born of bare hands, sweat, and unwavering hearts. Children's laughter drifted from the fields where local families came to play in the warmth of community. Marcella Tate waved from her porch, while Dr. Reynolds's children chased puppies near the barn. Isadora closed her eyes, letting the scene wash over her, the scent of cedar and roses, the hum of bees from the gardens, the distant melody of a fiddle and guitar as neighbors gathered for an impromptu evening song. Amelia stirred in her arms, small fingers brushing her mother's cheek. Cole slipped an arm around Isadora's shoulders. "We did it," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. She rested her head against his chest, listening to Amelia's gentle breathing. "Yes," she replied. "We made a home." He pressed a kiss to her temple, the warmth of his lips echoing the sun's last rays. "And our story lives on." She looked into his eyes, love and pride shining. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Below the brass plaque, the hearth smoke curled upward in celebration, as if heaven itself applauded their journey, from widowed sorrow and lonely passes to a thriving ranch and a child's first laughter. Their palace stood not on gold or grand design, but on the unbreakable bonds of love, resilience, and the promise of tomorrow.